Langston Reed was nothing like the polished, ostentatious figures one usually encountered in the glossy corridors of first-class lounges. On a brisk morning at the bustling airport, while others hurried through the maze of luxury check-ins and endless boarding announcements, Langston stood calmly in the first-class boarding line. His attire was simple: a clean, well-fitted plaid shirt, a pair of dark, worn-in jeans, and time-tested sneakers that had clearly traveled many miles with him. With a modest leather messenger bag slung casually over his shoulder, Langston's unassuming presence contrasted sharply with the gilded elegance that surrounded him. Unbeknownst to most, Langston Reed was not simply another traveler. He was the black CEO of a rising enterprise, a man who had weathered storms and shattered ceilings, one subtle yet determined step at a time. Yet today he exuded a quiet confidence that needed no flashy display of wealth. His unpretentious demeanor had an unmistakable air of inner assurance, one that made him seem almost immune to the petty squabbles and unfounded superiority that sometimes filled the room. Before diving deeper into this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know where you're watching from, and if stories like these touch your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments section and consider subscribing to my channel. The tension builds in the middle of the story, leading to an unforgettable ending, so don't miss a moment. Tomorrow, I have another special story waiting just for you. Standing right behind him, striding with an air of exaggerated self-importance, was Victoria Harding. Dressed in an impeccably tailored designer suit that gleamed under the airport lights, Victoria carried an aura of authority, one that demanded attention and respect at first glance. She was known in elite circles for her exacting standards and sharp tongue, and it was clear that even in such an international setting, she intended to remind everyone of her high status. Her perfectly styled hair, immaculate makeup, and poised smile combined to create an image of a person who considered herself above anyone else, especially someone who chose the simpler comforts that Langston embraced. As the line inched forward, Victoria's eyes narrowed upon noticing Langston's calm, almost indifferent expression. With an arched eyebrow and a barely concealed smirk, she remarked in a tone that dripped with sarcasm, "First class, huh? I wonder what sort of surprises we get to see these days." Her words, laced with a hint of condescension, cut across the ambient hum of boarding chatter. Langston simply turned his head, his expression remaining as serene as ever, and replied in a measured tone, "Indeed, the world is full of surprises." His voice had a steady quality that carried far beyond the hushed murmurs of the passengers around them. Victoria's lips curled into a disdainful smile. "Well, you don't exactly look like someone who's used to flying this way. It's quite rare to see genuine simplicity in a space filled with extravagance." Her tone was teasing and a little haughty, as if to underline the divide between her meticulously curated world and Langston's refreshing authenticity. As the boarding announcements rang out, the first-class line started moving. Langston and Victoria continued their unlikely proximity, following the flow of passengers into the luxurious cabin with tickets in hand. While Victoria moved with a deliberate, almost choreographed confidence, Langston's steps were measured, as if every movement was part of an inner rhythm, a silent meditation amidst the clamor of the modern world. Inside the cabin, as Langston made his way to his seat, he couldn't help but notice that fate had paired him right next to the woman who had so recently irritated him with her probing remarks. Slipping into his seat without fanfare, Langston offered a courteous nod as he settled in, ready to face whatever conversation would come next. Victoria, equally surprised yet determined to reclaim her dignity, raised an eyebrow. "It seems fate has a peculiar sense of humor," she said under her breath, almost to herself as she took her designated spot. The irony of the situation was not lost on her, a seasoned professional now forced to share space with a man whose presence was as inconspicuous as it was intriguing. A brief silence ensued as the cabin ambiance shifted. Other passengers began to take discreet notice of the subtle dynamics unfolding between the two. The quiet tension was palpable, and it was as if every eye in the compartment had suddenly tuned into a private drama that would soon reveal larger truths than any advertisement or generic in-flight entertainment could convey. Unable, or perhaps unwilling to let the moment dissolve into mundanity, Victoria decided to reignite the tension. "So what do you do for a living?" she asked, her tone conversational, yet laced with an undertone meant to elicit a reaction. There was a sense in her voice that she assumed she knew the answer already, that any response would only confirm the gap in their worlds. Langston, who had been organizing a few personal items in the overhead compartment, looked up and answered in a plain, matter-of-fact manner. "I'm in the film industry." The words were simple, but the understated honesty behind them radiated a quiet pride. He never boasted about his accomplishments. Instead, he allowed the substance of his life to speak louder than any flourish of unnecessary detail. Victoria's eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and condescension. "Oh, film? Commercials or something more small-time, I suppose," she remarked, attempting to diminish the significance of his work, with a laugh that was equal parts patronizing and dismissive. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of Langston's mouth. "There's a kind of beauty in creating stories that touch lives," he mused. "Sometimes it's not about the scale of your achievements, but the impact you make, no matter how quiet or unassuming the gesture." Her laughter came out as a short, bitter sound. "I suppose that works for people who settle for less," Victoria scoffed, her eyes narrowing as she tried to maintain a semblance of control over the conversation. "Some people just never experience what the best of life truly has to offer." Langston's serene gaze was unwavering as he picked up his water bottle when prompted by the attentive flight attendant. "Water is enough for me," he said softly, his tone imbued with a quiet confidence that could only come from someone at peace with himself. Sometimes simplicity speaks louder than ostentation. At this, Victoria smirked. "Are you really going to waste the privilege of flying first class on water? Truly, that's a statement in itself." Her comment was both a probe and a slight. Yet even as she intended to belittle his choice, her words revealed an inner insecurity, a need to underscore the ostensible superiority of her lifestyle. Other passengers began to tune in, their whispers growing into a low hum that filled the space between them. Some exchanged knowing glances, others frowned at the palpable tension. For a few brief moments, the luxurious cabin transformed into a microcosm where class and character were quietly debated in the language of subtle gestures and layered expressions. Langston, unfazed by the growing discomfort around them, leaned slightly forward. "I've learned that success is not about flaunting riches or occupying a certain social space. It's about understanding what truly matters, how we treat others, and the legacy we leave behind." His words carried the weight of his personal experiences, a reminder that no amount of external validation could substitute for the inner sense of purpose and connection he had cultivated over the years. Victoria, evidently unsettled by the unexpected profundity of his reply, attempted to reassert her authority with a measured chuckle. "Well, isn't that charming, a self-help philosophy delivered at 30,000 feet? But let's be realistic. The world isn't built on lofty ideals alone, Langston. Hard work, determination, and yes, even a bit of showmanship. That's what gets you ahead." Her voice, though confident, faltered for a split second as Langston's unassuming sincerity struck a chord with the nearby passengers. For a fleeting moment, the cabin fell silent again. Eyes that once followed Victoria's every gesture now flickered toward Langston, whose calm expression appeared to illuminate a kind of inner strength that was hard to ignore. As service continued and the in-flight attendant moved gracefully among the rows, Victoria's earlier bravado began to waver. At times, a brief insecurity seemed to surface behind her carefully curated mask. Encouraged by the subtle shift in the atmosphere, Langston continued in a quiet tone that nonetheless resonated with conviction. "I understand your sentiment, Victoria. The modern world does demand proof of achievement, but I believe that much of what we see as success is simply the noisy echo of external expectations. True confidence isn't measured by what we display on the surface, but by the depth of our character." His words, unadorned and direct, carried an almost meditative quality that seemed to absorb the attention of everyone within earshot. Victoria, feeling momentarily exposed by the depth of his insight, pressed on despite her inner turmoil. You might say that, but the reality is, we all need validation in some form, don't we? Perhaps deep down, our desire to prove ourselves is our way of seeking comfort in a chaotic world. Her voice wavered between challenge and a trace of vulnerability, hinting at the inner conflicts that even she had yet to resolve. Langston's response was measured and kind, yet carried an undeniable firmness. Validation should come from the honor of our actions and the respect we have for one another. When we measure our worth against each other instead of looking inward, we lose sight of what truly enriches our lives. His eyes, calm and unwavering, met hers with a sincerity that disarmed the sharpness in her tone. As the conversation continued, the cabin's energy subtly shifted again. Other passengers who had earlier silently observed this exchange began to nod in agreement or whisper among themselves about the wisdom in Langston's words. Even those who had eagerly embraced Victoria's initial bravado now started to appreciate the elegance of simplicity and honesty. Trying to regain her footing in the dialogue, Victoria leaned in, her voice lowering to a tone that suggested she was about to reveal a long-guarded truth. You know, Langston, sometimes I wonder if the loudest voices come from the ones who have the deepest emptiness inside. Perhaps that is why I feel compelled to remind others of what I've accomplished. Her admission was laced with a vulnerability that she had long tried to hide behind a veneer of superiority. For a moment, it appeared as if the facade had cracked enough to let the truth shine through. Langston's gaze softened, his expression turning empathic. Victoria, I don't think anyone here intends to dismiss your hard work. We all have our own burdens and battles, and it's natural to try to shield ourselves by putting on a show. What matters is how we learn from these moments and let them guide us towards compassion rather than division. His words, sincere and unpretentious, resonated powerfully in the quiet space between them. Before Victoria could offer another retort, an unexpected interruption came as the in-flight announcement chimed softly. The captain's voice, calm and measured, notified all passengers that their connecting flight had been secured with assurances of further travel arrangements. Yet, for Victoria, the announcement became a moment of personal reflection, one that underscored the fleeting nature of social hierarchies and the ephemeral quality of power. In that brief silence following the announcement, Victoria's eyes met Langston's again. For a long moment, the turbulent energy of confrontation dissolved into a quiet acknowledgement of shared humanity. Langston, she began, her tone almost tentative. Perhaps I was too quick to judge. I let my own insecurities masquerade as superiority. Maybe in my quest to prove myself, I lost sight of the very things that make us all human, our capacity for understanding and growth. Langston offered a gentle, forgiving smile that seemed to light up the dimmed atmosphere of the cabin. Thank you for that honesty, Victoria. We all have our stories, our struggles, our triumphs, and our missteps. In the end, our worth isn't defined by the badges we wear or the accolades we accumulate, but by the ways in which we lift others up along the journey. His words, resonant and warm, carried with them the kind of truth that could bridge even the widest divides. The cabin, once charged with tension, slowly began to relax as passengers reflected on the exchange. Those who had earlier whispered critiques of Victoria's attitude now shared quiet nods of approval with Langston. Even the flight attendants, who had delicately navigated the space between the two, seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief at the restored calm. Victoria, her face now softening with both regret and newfound clarity, turned her gaze away for a moment. I suppose sometimes we're so wrapped up in maintaining an image that we forget the value of being genuine, she admitted. In that moment, even the cold confines of first class transformed into a classroom where life itself was the greatest instructor. Langston, gathering his belongings as the flight prepared for descent, continued with a final remark that carried an almost poetic weight. Each one of us has our purpose. Whether we live to impress or to inspire is a choice we make daily. I hope that in time we come to see that the true mark of a successful life lies in compassion and the quiet dignity of doing what is right, even when no one is watching. The conversation left an indelible mark on the atmosphere of the plane. Victoria, once so certain of her own worth measured by external standards, now found herself reflecting on the genuine transformation that occurs when one is willing to listen to another's perspective. Other passengers, too, began to appreciate the silent lessons being taught right there in the aisle, an impromptu masterclass on humility, respect, and the subtle power of authenticity. As the plane began its descent, Langston's calm demeanor remained unchanged. With a quiet nod to Victoria, "How did that vary?" A gesture that neither acknowledged victory nor defeat, but rather celebrated mutual growth, he settled back into his seat, content in the knowledge that his own journey had never required him to shout his achievements. After all, true influence was a matter of quiet conviction and genuine care for others, not the bluster of competing egos. Once the aircraft touched down, the terminal filled with the usual flurry of arrivals and departures. Langston stepped off with his head held high, quietly greeting a few admirers who had recognized his humble confidence. His interactions were marked by a patient kindness, a gentle contrast to the otherwise hurried air of the elite world. Every handshake, every shared smile, and every kind word reaffirmed the legacy he was steadily building, a legacy defined not by flamboyance but by lasting impact on the lives he touched. Victoria, meanwhile, stood for a long moment by a large window overlooking the runway. The vibrant scene outside, a mosaic of faces from every corner of the country, mirrored the diversity of experience that had shaped her own path. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to see beyond the rigid confines of status and power. The introspection that followed was slow and painful, yet undeniably transformative. Perhaps, she mused, her need to assert dominance had been a shield for her inner doubts all along. And if so, letting that shield fall might just pave the way for genuine growth. In the days that followed, murmurs of the in-flight confrontation spread among the passengers and even the crew. Word of Langston Reed's humble wisdom in the midst of high-flying pretense began to circulate, carried by those who believed in the quiet power of character and the potential for change. Colleagues, rivals, and friends alike found themselves rethinking their notions of success. What began as a brief confrontation at 30,000 feet evolved into an enduring lesson in humility and the importance of mindful reflection. Langston continued on his journey with the same unpretentious grace, not seeking accolades or the weighty burden of public admiration. He simply went about his work in the film industry, a realm where storytelling was his craft and every interaction was a chance to shape a positive narrative. In boardrooms, on set, and even in casual moments shared with colleagues, his calm disposition and authentic leadership slowly influenced those around him. Over time, his influence spread far beyond the confines of luxury terminals and high-flying aircraft. It permeated the everyday lives of those who came to understand that success, in its truest form, was measured not by superficial markers, but by the meaningful connections we forge along the way. Victoria's transformation, too, became a quiet legend of its own. She began to seek out opportunities to engage in conversations not with the intent to dominate, but to learn and share. Slowly, the icy exterior that had once defined her persona softened. In boardrooms and public appearances, she started to acknowledge the importance of empathy, often recounting the in-flight encounter as a turning point in her understanding of leadership. Her revised outlook, though not without its remnants of old habits, ultimately led to more collaborative and inclusive initiatives, a subtle yet powerful twist in the narrative of someone once known solely for an unyielding drive for superiority. In time, the chance meeting between Langston Reed and Victoria Harding, two souls initially at odds in the cramped luxury of first-class seating, became a symbol of the unexpected intersections that define human existence. Their story was shared in hushed tones during networking sessions and eventually found its way into motivational speeches. It reminded everyone that the greatest lessons often arise from moments of tension, and that a simple act of authentic connection can reverberate well beyond the confines of any single encounter. As the memories of that flight slowly settled into the backdrop of busy lives, both Langston and Victoria continued forward, each carrying the lessons of that day. Langston, with his signature humility and unwavering resolve, pressed on toward new creative horizons, using his platform in film not as a stage for self-aggrandizement, but as an avenue for real transformative storytelling. And Victoria, reflecting on the complexities of ambition and the intermingling of pride and vulnerability, started to write a new chapter of her life, one marked by a gradual but unmistakable shift away from the need to dominate in favor of authentic growth and mutual respect. Their paths, though diverging in purpose, remained entwined by the memory of a quiet confrontation that soared at the altitude of truth. It served as a gentle reminder that, no matter where we come from or what accolades we accumulate, the true measure of our worth lies in the impact we have on those around us, the compassion we extend, and the integrity with which we live our daily lives. In the end, the in-flight conversation was not about declaring victory or asserting superiority. It was about illuminating the hidden dimensions of our humanity. It was a story of two individuals, one a celebrated Black CEO whose name, Langston Reed, had already become synonymous with quiet, resolute leadership, and the other, Victoria Harding, whose journey through conflict and vulnerability eventually led her to a deeper understanding of what it means to be truly great. As they parted ways in the busy terminal, the echoes of their conversation lingered in the minds of everyone who had witnessed or later learned of that day. The lesson was clear and uncomplicated. Success is not about the grand gestures or the loud proclamations. It is about the simple, unwavering commitment to living a life of integrity, empathy, and authenticity. And whether on a sunlit morning at an airport or in the quiet moments of self-reflection, it is this truth that guides us toward being better, both as leaders and as human beings. Thus, the story of Langston Reed and Victoria Harding became more than just a fleeting moment on a plane. It evolved into a timeless reminder that every interaction carries the potential for change, and that even in the midst of opulence and ostentation, the simple grace of humility will always have the final word. In a world filled with the clamor of pretension and the clashing notes of ambition, their encounter revealed that sometimes the most revolutionary acts are the ones that come quietly, from the heart, teaching us that the truest form of success is not measured by what we have, but by who we are and how we help others find their own strength. And so, as countless passengers disembarked and the day continued its relentless pace, the memory of that exchange remained, a living testament to the possibility of transformation. It was a narrative that spanned far beyond the boundaries of that brief encounter. It was a call to live with sincerity, to seek connection rather than validation, and to always remember that the value of our existence is ultimately defined by the positive difference we make in the lives of those around us. Whether in the quiet confidence of a Black CEO like Langston Reed, or in the reflective journey of someone like Victoria Harding, the quiet power of authenticity and respect forged a path for a future where every human story mattered. In a world that too often measures success by material possessions and outward appearances, let us remember that every interaction is a chance to redefine our true worth. Let us strive to cultivate an inner strength that cannot be shaken by superficial judgments. And let us choose in every moment to see the depth and value in each other, reminding ourselves that in the grand tapestry of life, it is our choices, our kindness, and our commitment to honor one another that ultimately light our way to a more compassionate, meaningful existence. Thank you for reading this extended narrative, a story of transformation, understanding, and the enduring power of humility. May Langston Reed's quiet strength inspire you to look beyond the surface, embrace your true self, and above all, foster a spirit of genuine connection with everyone you meet on your journey.